Stop and think. Imagine you have a country. You have your own currency, your own central bank. You can adjust interest rates when the economy turns bad. And if necessary, you can allow your currency to lose value. These are unpleasant tools, yes, but they are your tools. Now, put those tools on the table and say this: I don't need them anymore. That is exactly what 11 European countries did in 1999, voluntarily, enthusiastically. And what they received in exchange for what they placed on that table is something we are still debating today. Before we move on to the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the others. The dream was real, but it wasn't economic. The euro was not born as an economic project. It was born as a political dream. 2 world wars, tens of millions dead, cities reduced to rubble. European leaders had one thought: never again. And they believed this. If European countries trade together and use the same currency, the cost of war would become so high that no one would dare take that risk. The idea was not entirely wrong. European integration did contribute to the longest period of peace in the continent's history. But at some point, the political dream moved ahead of economic reality. Leaders were no longer asking, how does this work? They were asking, how do we advance integration? And those two questions produce very different answers. The result is clear: a system implemented despite lacking the necessary conditions for a functioning monetary union. Mundell's warning and the last whisper before the storm. In 1961, Canadian economist Robert Mundell developed the concept of the optimal currency area. It answered a simple question: under what conditions can multiple countries successfully share a common wallet? According to Mundell, 3 conditions were required. First, labor must move freely. If jobs disappear in one country, people should be able to move easily to another. Second, wages must be flexible. When the economy is shaken, salaries must be able to adjust up or down. Third, there must be a central fiscal authority, a mechanism capable of transferring resources from strong regions to weaker ones. Europe had none of these. When a Greek worker loses his job, he does not simply move to Germany. The language is different. The culture is different. The legal system is different. Diplomas are not easily recognized. Europe also lacks a true central treasury. There is no mechanism like Washington transferring money from rich states to poorer ones. Mundell wrote this in 1961. The euro was launched in 1999. In those 38 years, these conditions were not met. Yet the project continued, because the political momentum was too strong. Too many careers, too much prestige, too much institutional credibility had been invested in the euro. The warnings were dismissed as pessimism. First fracture, beyond the standards. When the euro was introduced, winners and losers became visible almost immediately. The divide followed a geographic line. The North won, the South lost. Germany had everything the euro required: fiscal discipline, strong exports, low inflation. When the European Central Bank set interest rates for the entire Eurozone, in practice, it was setting them for Germany. For Southern Europe, those rates were disastrous. In the early 2000s, historically low interest rates arrived. Spain, Greece, Portugal, Ireland. These countries faced cheap credit they had never seen before. Spanish families could take mortgages at 3% instead of 8%. The Greek government could borrow at nearly the same rate as Germany. What did they do? They borrowed aggressively. Spain created a real estate bubble that rivaled America's. Ireland's banking system swelled to 10 times the size of its economy. Greece financed a government that spent 50% more than it collected in taxes. They all shared the same belief: if the euro exists, Germany will not let us collapse. They were half right. Germany did not let them collapse. But no one foresaw the cost. Second fracture, removing the safety valve. Before the euro, Southern European countries had a safety valve: devaluation. When the economy stumbled, you could let your currency lose value. Exports would become cheaper. Tourism would revive. International competitiveness would return. It was painful. Imports became more expensive. Purchasing power declined, but it worked. Most importantly, it gave the economy breathing room. The euro closed that door. and replaced it with nothing. When Greece collapsed in 2010, devaluation was no longer an option. The only path was internal devaluation. In polite economic language, that meant crushing wages, cutting pensions, dismantling public services, and raising unemployment until costs fell to competitive levels. The numbers are clear. Unemployment reached 27%. Youth unemployment exceeded 60%. Doctors and engineers left the country. Suicide rates rose. Businesses closed. And 10 years later, Greece's debt was higher than before the crisis began. Because austerity shrank the economy faster than the debt could shrink. The medicine did not heal the patient, but the patient had no alternative. Leaving the euro, printing a new currency, facing instant devaluation and capital flight, those costs appeared too high. So Greece stayed. It suffered. It is still suffering. Third fracture, watch your own fate. Who chooses the president of the European Central Bank? Not you, not me. No citizen elects them. Officials of the ECB are appointed, not elected. Their decisions cannot be overturned by any national parliament. Their mandate is written into European treaties and requires unanimity to change. This means that when the ECB raises interest rates to contain inflation in Germany and that decision suffocates growth in Italy, no Italian voter can change it. They cannot vote for a different policy or elect a different monetary authority. This is not merely a technical issue. It is political poison. When people feel they have no voice within a system, they turn toward voices that seek to break the system. In Italy, traditional centrist parties have eroded for decades. Today, the country is governed by parties that openly campaigned against the euro's constraints. In France, Marine Le Pen remains among the most popular politicians despite advocating leaving the euro. In Greece, Syriza won elections by rejecting austerity, wrestled with European creditors for 6 months, and then surrendered because it held no real leverage. A democratic deficit does not merely produce bad politics. It produces dangerous politics. Fourth fracture, the Masca rescue. Who really won? The 2010 Greek crisis exposed a question that the architects of the euro had deliberately left ambiguous. When a member state approaches bankruptcy, who pays? The answer was surprising. Not the ones who caused the problem. Others. When Greece's debt became unsustainable, there were 2 options. Greece could default, imposing heavy losses on French and German banks that had lent heavily to it. Or European taxpayers could rescue those banks through Greece. They chose the second, but they did not call it that. They called it a Greek bailout. In reality, it was a bailout of French and German banks. The money did not remain in Greece. It flowed to creditors. Greek citizens received austerity. The banks got their money back. The debt remained on Greece's shoulders, restructured, but still crushing. The same pattern repeated in Ireland, Portugal, Spain. Profits were privatized. Losses were socialized. On a continental scale, Greece's economy shrank by 25% during the crisis, comparable to the Great Depression. Not because of a natural disaster, not because of war, but because of decisions made in Frankfurt and Brussels. Decisions Greek citizens had no vote over. Who knew? This was not a surprise. In the 1990s, a group of German economists published what became known as the Euro Manifesto. They warned that the Eurozone was not an optimal currency area, that monetary union, without fiscal union, was dangerously premature, and that the first serious shock would push weaker economies into disaster. They were dismissed as pessimists, as nationalists. In the United States, Milton Friedman predicted that the euro would not survive its first serious recession. He was correct about unemployment, but he underestimated how much pain these countries would absorb rather than exit. Even internal European Commission documents acknowledged the design flaws. Yet the project continued, because turning back no longer seemed possible. The end of the road? The euro faces 3 paths. First, muddling through. The ECB intervenes when crises erupt, governments buy time with cosmetic reforms. Debt accumulates. Southern Europe remains trapped. This is what has happened for the last 15 years. It could continue. Second, real reform. A genuine fiscal union. A European treasury with taxation and spending authority, a mechanism transferring resources from strong regions to weak ones. These are what the euro truly requires. And they are nearly politically impossible, because they would require Germany to permanently subsidize Southern Europe, something German voters would not accept. Third, fragmentation. A severe enough crisis, a radical enough political shock. As structural problems remain unresolved, this possibility gains weight each year. Italy's debt grows. France's deficit widens. The ECB exhausts its tools. And somewhere ahead lies a shock that will finally break the trust holding the system together. When? No one knows. But mathematically, it appears to be coming. The lesson of history. For centuries, history has taught the same lesson. You cannot build a lasting monetary system on political will alone. You can only build it on economic reality. The gold standard worked for a century because it rested on physical scarcity. The Bretton Woods system worked for a generation because it rested on American economic dominance. When their anchors were removed, both collapsed. The euro rests on political will, on the belief that European leaders will always find a solution. That belief has held for 25 years. It may hold for 25 more. But political will is the most fragile anchor of all. Elections can shift overnight. Crises can erupt without warning. Trust can erode quietly until it snaps. Rome once tried to hold its empire together through political will as well. Its economic foundations had decayed, yet the system endured. For a while, history does not repeat itself. But if you fail to understand it, it crushes you. The architects of the euro were aware of the risks. They built it anyway. The ones who paid the price were never the architects. As always, it was ordinary people, those who trusted the system blindly, who believed it had been built for them. Thank you for watching.